Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. It's Digital Perspectives. You can follow me at the top of the screen at Dig Perspectives on Twitter or Digital Perspectives News on Facebook. And we have with us again 25-year Wall Street veteran Linda P. Jones and book author in the house. Linda, how are you?
I'm great, Brad. And gosh, we just were talking last night on the panel and had such a great time. And here we are again, but there was so much more to talk about. I'm excited to be back again.
There really is. And what a wonderful, wonderful panel that was last night. And again, thank you to everybody who was able to carve the time out of their busy lives to sit down together. It was a really great conversation. But there's a few points of current event news that lead us to conversations that have been in the XRP digital asset crypto space for quite some time. One of which I want to start with right now is a combination of the executive order for crypto, which has been called a matter of national security here in the U.S., recent laws passed for regulation of crypto in Saudi Arabia, and the news that Saudi Arabia is thinking about using the yuan and ditching the petrodollar. Linda, tell us what you think here.
There is so much going on right now, and it's interesting how it's very coordinated amongst countries. This very same day that our executive order came out, there were new laws that came out in Dubai about cryptocurrency as well. And other countries are talking about bringing out cryptocurrency laws. Now, it was very interesting that Russia and China have talked about trading oil without using the US dollar. And this goes again with the idea that the sanctions took Russia out of the SWIFT system and is creating a new cross-border interbank payment system, the CIPS system, that is going to be used instead of the dollar. So this is another sign, kind of a continuation of what we were talking about last night with the Federal Reserve, having some real issues and this other payment system being out there. And there's a piece of this with XRP that's a possible future currency system with central bank digital currencies. What do you think?
Well, I mean, you're talking about CIPS, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, that is was it Chinese interbanking payment system? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Yes. And with the news being what it is, and we see that obviously Russia and China have had huge trade relations for a very long time, as well as other countries. But we know that the Kremlin had said, I think it was a year or more ago, that they had a new financial system built for Russia and China. We know that Saudi Arabia now considering using CIPS. And is it Saudi Arabia or Dubai?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. And we know that they're considering ditching the petrodollar, which is really where a lot of our dollar strength and value comes from, right? And going to the yuan. What are we talking about here with this kind of an impact to the monetary system, not just the economy?
Well, if we go back in history, we remember that it was Henry Kissinger who set up the petrodollar. Mm-hmm. And basically, he approached the biggest oil trader, Saudi Arabia, and said, if you trade oil in dollars, we will protect you militarily. And that set up the dollar to be in demand. And that basically, made it the world's reserve currency. It gave it more strength and power, and something that the Federal Reserve, always had the ability to create more. And as long as they restrained their printing of more, if you will, their creation of more, then we were fine. Even when we went off the gold standard, that wasn't a good thing. But if you keep your supply down, it helps temper inflation. But now with COVID and everything that happened and all the creation, as you said, 80% more money out there, or 80% has been created in the last 2 years, I believe it was, yes. That there's just so much more supply now, and that's getting out of control. And with all the shortages and et cetera, now we have this inflation problem. And now with the sanctions, we have people turning away from the dollar, not wanting to use it, and wanting to use gold-backed currencies, which is what China has said they are going to do, and Russia has said that they're going to do. And as you and I have talked earlier, usually the next version after a fiat currency is a gold-backed system. So we're already seeing part of the world turning that way, and the BRICS countries headed that way and away from the fiat currency of the dollar.
You know, to add to the point that you're making here, it was just a week or two ago we heard Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, acknowledge in a congressional hearing or conference that you could have more than one world reserve currency sit beside the dollar.
Yes, that was huge.
Huge moment.
That's never been said before.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge moment and admission by the head of the Federal Reserve. So obviously we know, but for the audience that needs to understand, how does this bridge us to where we are on the digital asset XRP side of the fence here? What's the problem? How does it get solved? How does XRP play a role?
Well, I think that's what everyone in the XRP community is trying to figure out. And we're all sleuths trying to figure that out. But I could see one solution or possibility could be where the IMF might end up with the escrow.
Okay.
And that would allow the countries around the world to be able to fund their countries without using a central bank system. And they could each develop a central bank digital currency using XRP that is fully convertible from the legacy system of SWIFT, but also from one country to another without the monies that we call the Nostro Vostro accounts, which is the $27 trillion that sits there idle waiting for someone to do foreign exchange. And if you don't have to have that, that's $27 trillion that can go to work. And that is something that is going to shift things dramatically. But I see that this is a real possibility. What do you think?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you bring this up about the IMF. I mean, we know it's been discussed. We know that there was a document years ago that the IMF had labeled in a report that XRP was a supranational currency, is how it was referred to. So there's a lot of credence to the idea that the XRP token, I mean, look, if we go back to the creation of the IMF and the SDR, what we're really going back to is the idea of Bretton Woods and the idea of the Bancor coin that was introduced by John Maynard Keynes, right?
Yeah.
And now we have the technology to actually do what he proposed at that time that we didn't have the technology to do. So I certainly see the IMF playing a role. I certainly see the IMF in the long term, in my speculation and my research, you know, holding XRP at some point or certainly using it in a transactional manner, the way it's designed. One of the things I find interesting to the point that you're making here in this whole devaluation of currencies and the hit that the US dollar has taken with so much money to 80% in the last 20 plus months, there is a valuation done every 5 years on the SDR basket, and it has been delayed, I believe, at least twice in the last 2 times it was supposed to be reviewed. And that's where they take a look at each currency of the 5 that are in the basket and check out the weighted averages of those currencies based on their value. And you have to say, with so much money being printed for the dollar and just in the last 20 plus months, they have moved that reevaluation point of the SDR basket and the currencies in it to July this year. Now, if it's not delayed again, one has to wonder what is going to be the valuation of the dollar and the other currencies that sit in that basket, Linda.
Right. And for anyone who's not familiar with the SDR, it stands for Special Drawing Rights. Mm-hmm. And that is something that's been used at the government level for trade. It consists of 5 currencies: the dollar, the pound, the euro, the yen, and the yuan. And so, yes, I think there is going to be some sort of transition. I believe we're in a transition away from the Federal Reserve being the dominant world's currency to a level playing field, where we're going to have the ability for the sharing of that reserve currency, whether that's the SDR. I still believe that's going to be more at the government level, but I believe central bank digital currencies are going to be the official government version digitally of each currency of each country, and that there's going to be some sort of a level playing field where that's distributed amongst countries rather than one country, being the US, having all of the power and all of the strength and the ability to use currency as a weapon. Because look at how these sanctions have been used as a weapon. And while some might argue that is a good thing and others might argue it's not, the fact of the matter is they've been used many times for many reasons with many countries. And that gives a lot of power. And so maybe we're coming into a time where more countries can share and be a little bit more equal.
I think you make a great point here. And this is going to take me to the conversation where we talk about central bank digital currencies for a second and the digital yuan, and understanding what the point was when we opened this thing up today about Saudi considering ditching the petrodollar and using the yuan. What about the digital yuan? There's nothing but zero privacy in it. China's going to see everything you do with it if you use it. That's not a solution make for the future, Linda, certainly not for the United States. So where does that take us?
I agree. And that's something that has been of concern. I think at one point, maybe under another situation, or what was called the Great Reset, which I don't believe is the reset we're going to get. I think there was a plan that was a darker plan, and that was of more control, which is something that the CCP has right now with the digital yuan. And with that, they're able to have a social credit system and control system where they can actually cut off people's funding if they don't like their politics or they don't like certain things they're doing. They can make it that they can't have access to their money. Somewhat similar to what we saw in Canada when people started supporting the truckers and the government said, we're going to shut off your funds.
Yes.
So this is something that we definitely don't want to have. And that's why I believe the US is going to do something different. We're not going to give control to the Federal Reserve over our wallets, which would essentially make us like China. And so what Tom Emmer, Congressman, has said is that he wants to separate that so that the government or the Federal Reserve does not have any ownership over our wallets, but we're in control of our own wallets and we have privacy, and that it falls under the Constitution and we're protected and we won't have a social credit system. And that is the only way I support cryptocurrency, is for us to have freedom and our rights under the Constitution and not to have a social credit system. What do you say?
Well said, and I couldn't agree more. And I have to say, when we're looking at this whole conversation about central bank digital currencies, the control and the power of these central governments and central banks like China, you're not having any privacy there. I think, this is one of those moments where, the conventional world, the monetary system is absolutely intersecting with the digital world and the prospectors and investors in this space like you and myself, and especially in regard to XRP, because this is like number one numero uno why I would say we need XRP right away as a bridge currency to isolate having to hold a digital yuan ever at all, but being able to have freedom to do business with China if you need to.
I agree. And that's why XRP is so important. And that is also why there's speculation about, is someone going to try to take it from us? What's going to happen? And this sort of led me to a letter from Patrick Riley, who is Chief Executive Officer of Reaper Financial, who really delved into that and posted an official position on Ripple and the case and the legal proceedings. And he published it on Twitter back in January of 2022. And I just want to read a paragraph of that, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Love Patrick Riley and his insights.
Yeah. So this letter was really well done. And the second paragraph of it says, per the Fifth Amendment, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That was a quote.
Mhm.
The federal government and SEC must offer a buyback opportunity to retail owners of said XRP property if a ruling was made against its circulation. If that is the route that federal government chooses to pursue, then the finite nature of the XRP blockchain makes XRP infinitely more valuable than the loosely produced Federal Reserve note, which will only increase in supply. Therefore, the only fair compensation for XRP property is to calculate the total number of XRP divided by the complete and total assets, debt, and liabilities of the US dollar. Any less is a violation of the US Constitution and the Bretton Woods Agreement, in which the US dollar is the global reserve currency. The SEC case against the property rights of private citizens is contrary to the Constitution, and any ruling or law that is contrary to the Constitution is null and void. An adverse ruling against property rights will be seen as a violation of the Constitution that is in bad faith to the American people. Again, that was Patrick Riley, CEO of Reaper Financial.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hats off to Patrick. I remember reading that and like the hair standing up on the back of my neck, like, yes, go Patrick. It was just incredible. And Jimmy Valley, too, for the deal being proposed and trying to really, get the acknowledgement from the Fed to understand pretty much the same argument that's eloquently put forward by Patrick in that letter, too, right?
Absolutely. And Jimmy, as we know, and as was mentioned last night on the panel, Jimmy came up with a valuation for all of the debt. What would that number be that Patrick talked about? And Jimmy came up with 37,500 per XRP, which may be a guideline. I mean, he did present it to the Federal Reserve, he says, and we don't know of any response or any sort of agreement, but we do know that that was a fair valuation, and perhaps it's a marker so that in case there ever is a buyout offer, we have some sort of idea what the value should be.
Absolutely. And let's look at another angle here. And I know I've shared it on the show, but I just want to quickly go over it just so people have other things they can consider when looking at this information. And all of this is our speculation into where this goes. And I find it fascinating that these magnificent ideas of speculation still to this day cannot be dismissed. And I've been in here in this space 5 years, but I offer, outside of the IMF participating, I also believe that we've seen clear evidence clearing away of pre-allocation from Ripple. And I believe that was to incentivize different banks, remittance corridors, as we've heard Miguel Villas at his time of being the head of XRP Global Markets, where they would incentivize certain corridors and remittance makers and market makers and participants, and basically say, hey, instead of you using the traditional path of direct path, cash to cash, holding in all these different accounts, use this new bridged XRP method. And if you suffer any cost on your end for using the new bridge method, at least for now, we'll cover the spread. And that's what they call seigniorage. And that is also really looked at as like priming the pump, right? And getting these corridors and these market makers. And then obviously when they get to release more cash, they don't have to hold these cash in these smaller exotic corridors. This really starts to free it up. And then over time, it really starts to catch fire. You can settle faster. You can get the money there quicker, cheaper, the whole bit. I start going into the idea that if we build out on that and look at how much money has been printed in the U.S., the conversation we just had about devaluing the currencies, a new valuation of the SDR basket, July of this year, God only knows where that comes out for the U.S. dollar, right? And when we look at all of these things on the forefront, Saudi Arabia potentially not using the petrodollar, at least to the degree that they have been, it
Right.
all paints a picture to me, Linda, that, maybe what we're seeing, because the Fed is so bloated, maybe Ripple becomes the central bank to become the backstop for the Fed. I don't know, but when I look at the market, when people say the Ripple's been building the market infrastructure, or Brad Garlinghouse or others, of course, we all think of plumbing and cables around the world to make all of this possible. And it's true, they're doing all of that. But the other part of market infrastructure to me is those main infrastructure hubs that allow the world to function. And when it comes to global payments, Brad Garlinghouse has said 90 or 90+% of the banks that are making cross-border payments are paying 5 to 6 banks that actually make those payments. It is a very small, tight loop of big banks that actually do the payments for all the banks. So when I think of that tight, closed loop circle, I start thinking to myself, okay, well, it'd be very easy to get those 5 or 6 banks updated on market infrastructure and their legacy systems. And it might be a difficult job in each individual task, but when you're talking about a tight circle like that to close loop on that, I think it really gets very, very possible instead of thinking about it from the, well, let's get consumers to where they can do it on their end and every consumer can have it. That's a much longer road for adoption in my mind. So long way around the mountain here is to say that, if we're seeing this tight loop, we have to see it in more than just one place. You can't just have RippleNet that could replace SWIFT. You have to have a PolySign that I believe could replace and complement the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation for settlement of these securities and things. And then you have to have something that's going to be able to really withstand the bloating and the printing that the Fed has done. And what other entity on earth could serve in that role than someone like Ripple, who has XRP in escrow, Linda?
Right. Well, and you make a great point. And like I said last night, in 1913, the central bank came into being with the Federal Reserve Act. And I think we're going away from a central bank system of these small banks being in control. And we're going back to the Treasury, the US Treasury and other countries' treasuries that are going to control their money and not have the central banks be in control anymore. And that's where Ripple comes in, could act as that part of the Treasury that is facilitating that. And Ripple themselves have said they're here to make a dent in the universe, quote unquote, and handle all the money. And so, yes, that's going to include derivatives. That's going to include real estate. It's going to include commodities and stocks and money, cash. It's going to include all the assets. And this is a transition that we're in from a system that's been a centralized controlled system to a decentralized system that is going to be the biggest change that we've experienced in our lifetimes.
I think that's really well said right there. Now, let's move to this idea, because a lot of people are concerned, can the government take over our crypto or the escrow? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Patrick Riley. This is something that can't just be taken. If a government takes property, they have to compensate people for that property. So even if they come in and they're going to build a freeway and they take the land, they pay them something for the land. They don't just take the land. And that usually is a fair market value. So coming up with the fair market value that Jimmy Valley came up with, I think was a great service to all XRP holders. And I think that who knows how that's all going to play out, but certainly we have a sense of what the true value should be. And I think that right now in the private ledger that is running in the background, that we know central banks are running their money on a private ledger, and Ripple has come out and been public about that liquidity is running there. And I think there's a completely different value that they're seeing on that side and not the 75 cents that we see on our side.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want anyone offering me fair market value without having the full banking and full scale intended use of the asset inside of that formula. Yeah, that's for sure.
And that's where, when they talk about flipping the switch, that's what I think that is. Those two coming together, because we've had a liquidity system that has been private, and at some point it's going to merge. And I believe Brad said it recently at Ripple. He said, when there's enough liquidity in the system, then we can flip the switch. And he said, that's what we're in the process of doing now.
He sure did say it. And, to that point, how much is a protocol like the XRP ledger, which just so happens to be a decentralized exchange, and the only one that I'm aware of that can take the world from the paper friction world into the digital world, is it not? How much is a protocol and a token like that really worth, Linda?
Oh, all the money. It's worth everything. I mean, it's something that's a unique technology. Nothing else does this. It was brilliant. And, it's just something that's going to really revolutionize everything.
I really do believe that is true. Look, I mean, this is incredible. We have a lot of stuff that we've talked about here, and I think I want to kind of wrap it right here for this one. But any final thoughts before we go?
I just want to encourage all the XRP holders to hold strong. Please get your XRP off of exchanges. This is a very valuable asset that you own. You need to lock it up in a cold wallet, either a Ledger Nano or Decent wallet. You need to get it in your own control. Get it off the exchanges now.
Well said. Linda P. Jones, be wealthy and smart. I like it. Thank you so much, Linda.
My pleasure, Brad.